It's 3 o'clock. Thank you for joining us today. This is another MSTP or MD-PhD program application webinar. My name is José Cavazos. I'm the program director at the South Texas MSTP at UT Health San Antonio in the Long School of Medicine. Today's topic is going to be about what's your homework prior to having an interview and showing up virtually for 2021 in a Zoom webinar, and what the secondary application and communication with the programs should be about, and all of those questions. This is a recorded webinar, so hopefully we're going to be able to have it available online for you to to examine at a later time. Can I have next slide? Perfect. So I am a physician scientist. I'm a professor of neurology. I'm a clinician scientist in epilepsy, and I am the program director at the South Texas Medical Scientist Training Program. Next slide. So, as I said, today I wanted to address questions related to the upcoming admissions cycle, particularly regarding regarding the COVID pandemic and what are the problems that we're having in terms of as it pertains to admission cycle. The idea here is to support transparency for the applicants, to lower your stress and anxiety. And as I said, these are going to be publicly available in YouTube. You can also reach out and see prior webinars. We have 4 webinars already in there that pertain different aspects of the admissions process, including getting your application. Next slide. So previous recordings will be also placed in the chat box so that you can see them. Please submit your questions in the chat box or unmute and ask live. And you can email us at stxmstp, single word, at uthscsa.edu. Next slide. So, secondary applications. So you have submitted your primary application to APCAS. So your primary application consists of all the experiences, all the transcripts, all the letters of recommendation, and your essays. Now, many times schools automatically just send you a request for additional questions. And what these are additional questions in their common application, many times is this school wants to know, why us? Why are you applying to, San Antonio, to, Southwestern, to, Penn, or wherever you are applying? They are quite often very individualized. You can use paste and copy out of your application. If they are asking you, for example, a question about resilience, and you already made a point of resilience in your essay that you believe is the strongest point of resilience. Well, that's one way of looking at things. Another possibility is this is another blank blank canvas where you are able to portray additional things about yourself. Unfortunately, many of these secondary applications have a cost. I'm happy to tell you that the South Texas MSTP has no formal secondary application, we do ask you some extra questions, but there is absolutely no cost. I see it, and many of us see it, as another barrier to an application. If you start thinking about all of these applications, secondary applications, they can very rapidly add up to hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. So particularly for those of you who are lower socioeconomic status, you may want to ask to have a waiver of that application, secondary application. But that is school by school. So adding applications are, you first add the schools in AMCAS, and it costs you about $40 to add another school, okay? Now, from the time that they send you and they receive the application, the school can, as I said, look at your benchmarks or just hold your application and manually send you a secondary application. Some schools, it's just automatically. Everybody who sends it, you send automatically that secondary application. Now, the intent of these secondary applications is for you to answer them within 2 weeks. In fact, some schools may disregard applications who took much longer than that to receive the answers to those questions. Some schools have very long secondary applications with up to 10 questions that may require multiple essays. Some questions, they are just very simply asking you, tell me, who are you interested in mentors? Who are you interested in PhDs? Tell me, or they have 2 or 3 questions about, tell me something that you have not said in the application, or give me an aspect, as I said, of resilience. Now, do schools even read them? Yes, they do. They do. I mean, we actually review applications. Now, one of the real problems that I see across the board is that sometimes, particularly for schools that automatically send, they may not have considered, for example, whether that student will be interviewable based on the benchmarks of that school. I can assure you that if you receive a communication from us, you are being, for a secondary information, it is because we're interviewing you or considering you heavily for the interview slot. Now, this year, because it's all virtual, and because the AAMC has also offered to do and repurpose something called AAMC Vita. If you Google AAMC Vita, you are going to find what this virtual interview is about. It is a recorded interview that lasts somewhere in between 15 to 24, 25 minutes, where they give you a question, and within 5 minutes, you need to start recording your answer. And it is a question about resilience, a question about empathy, a question about caring, etc., etc. Now, we, the South Texas MSTP, plans to use this for to use that information to provide, or essentially not do, a medical school interview. And so if you're applying to our program and we are interviewing, you're going to get an email inviting you to an interview, and at the same time inviting you to record this Vita recording. Now, that recording, if you already have done, will be immediately available to us. Now, we are just gonna use it not to pre-screen you out of interviewing you, but to use it to take it to the medical school and avoid the medical school interview. Now, if you want to be considered in the MD PhD program or also the MD only program, you need to submit an application in AMCAS. This is the core application for the MD PhD program, but it is an application in TMD SAS. And in both cases, we are going to be then considering you. And so in a sense, it's an interview for two times at bat. It's an interview for the MD program, and it is an interview for the MD PhD. Now, just remember that a state of residency doesn't matter. And it is not considered whatsoever for MD PhD. It is important and critical for the MD only interview in Texas. Now, for other schools, what it is the point? Again, it is about us. If you do a lot of cut and paste from other essays or from your list of other secondary questions, make sure that you are answering the secondary for a given program with the answers for that given program. If, I've seen or I have heard of circumstances where an individual just got rejected because, you are telling, a, particular University of the North Pole is reading, and you are saying here, oh, but the South Pole program has so many amenities. Well, sorry, you're applying to the North Pole. So I don't care about this secondary application. So be very certain about what you are writing here, and it is very useful to reread your application. Okay, let's have the next slide. Yes, thank you. Communicating with programs, updates. Yes, be proactive. This is going to be a conversation. Now, the ideal applicant applies early. It doesn't mean that you're going to be then rejected. Quite often, if you have the minimum academic benchmarks, what happens even if you are not interviewed early is your application is kept in the pool of eligible applications for the later slots. If you apply mid-cycle or late in the cycle, one of the problems is then the number of chances to interview in that particular program, it may be reduced. So be proactive. If you apply early, communicate with programs about every 2 months. So if there is a significant change, so what are those potential significant changes? You submit an abstract for a new conference or a manuscript that was in the past had just gotten accepted, or the conference was postponed because of COVID, but your abstract was accepted. So again, no more than a couple of paragraphs, keep it sweet and simple, but just express interest in the program. And this is so-and-so, and you put in parentheses AMCAS ID, your application ID, and you put your application ID. Make sure that you're using a professional email, not sweetprincess@gmail.com. Say something, your name, or say something professional. In my case, my Gmail account, for example, is is just a single word, Dr. Jose Cavazos. And that's an example of my personal Gmail account. So say something that they may give you a number, like Jose Cavazos 73 or something along those lines. But make it into a professional Gmail. Now, make sure that you look at this account, make sure that you understand and see all your filters. Make sure that your spam mail gets read. Make sure, because many things may actually be automatically sent into things of this sort. So you need to examine those folders very carefully, and you need to be examining them about once a week. But just keep in mind that if they send it, if you check them on Friday and they send you on Monday, the clock for communicating with this program is 2 weeks. So you need to be submitting your secondary. Make sure that the email account that is in your AMCAS application is exactly the same, and it is correct as compared to the account that you are checking. Make sure that your mobile phone number is correct. And if you have any changes, contact AMCAS. They can reopen accounts. So it can reopen and allow you to edit contact information. Now, the kinds of updates that are important, and you may be more often having some communication as once a month, is if there is an MCAT score that is new. Those things are gonna automatically upload into your profile because our program is checking every night with the national AMCAS account, but it doesn't necessarily alert me that you took a new MCAT score. And I may have already put you in the hold until late, and you have a new number that makes you a more desirable here or there. Accepted publications, as I said, manuscripts, posters, even submissions, particularly if your letters of recommendation say so. Now, let's say that you started a research experience and you finally go back to the lab and you start working again into your research experience. That's, an update that you can, remind people that you not only are interested in that particular school, but again, don't send it as a spam to everybody. Dear program, I just submitted. Be very specific. We are very sensitive to those kinds of things. Now, following up after interviews, it's also important. Now, some programs have rolling acceptances. Just because you were not selected for the person that gets the rolling acceptance for that particular interview group, doesn't mean that that you're not going to be selected, perhaps 2 or 3 or 6 weeks later. Because what we do is, who is the next best person of the entire group of people who we have interviewed? And so, you may have an interview with us in August, to start early, or in February, and you still give you an acceptance. Next slide. So, yes, check email regularly. And as I also told you, make sure that you check your email folders for spam and others, because they might not be, that's where some of these things are. Now, we and every single MD PhD program is looking for you to continue to be doing research. That's to us the key aspect in this consideration. So we want you to try to, for you to reassume your research experience as soon as you can. Now, do them safely with social distancing and with all the appropriate safeguards and appropriate things that may be happening regionally. Here in San Antonio, we just recently had a surge of cases after doing fantastic for many weeks and days. Yeah, we were just having, in the teens, the number of people who were using ventilators. Unfortunately, everybody opened up and they forgot that social distancing was needed. To use the mask was not needed. People perhaps were not doing as many hand washes and the like. The bottom line is that now we're paying back. And since Memorial Day, about 2 weeks after, we started seeing an uptick in cases. Now, so conditions on the ground may vary. Our students right now are doing some laboratory rotations. They are using social distancing. However, the last couple of weeks of these rotations may end up doing more virtual activities and less time spent in the wet lab. Now, consider a plan B if you're not getting interviews. So if you're not getting interviews, I'm happy to talk to many of you. I can do that in one-to-one. I do that through the web forum of Student Doctor Network, SDN. I do that via email. I do some Zoom consultations with some of these students. The bottom line is you need to reassess why there is this mismatch between your application. Read this carefully, your application. Did all your letters of recommendation got uploaded? Is there any hold in your application? I cannot give a lot of feedback while you are being actively applying, but I spent multiple hours mentoring and advising students who apply and unfortunately did not get in last cycle. One of the things that you need to do is face the brutal facts. If your entire application, if this particular school has a median of 520 MCAT and you have a 503 and you only apply to schools with 520s, you're not going to get in. You're not going to get, despite that, I strongly believe in holistic admissions. It's unlikely that that school will review your application. Now, our minimums academic benchmarks vary from year to year, but GPA and MCATs need to be, at least we like to see a 508. We like to see better numbers than that. I do consider some applicants less than that, but you need to have a terrific story to tell us why that is the case. Now, the GPA, you may have had a very rough semester. Tell us what happened. Tell us if there is a problem, an issue. You don't need to disclose that you had a medical issue or a life issue. Just say, I had a personal loss in my family, or a personal difficulty that led me to be overstretched under those circumstances, and I was caring for myself, or I was doing this as clearly shown by my academic transcript. I was able to resolve that problem, and I applied myself, and I was able to excel and compete very successfully. In fact, those resilient stories are better indication that you are going to be able to succeed. Having said that, if your numbers are with GPAs below 3.2, below 3.3, you are going to again have you're gonna need to do some courses, perhaps a master's with coursework to show that you're gonna succeed. Now, another discordance is people who have numbers that are close to the median, 3.6, for example, in a 513, but just apply to Ivy League schools or top 10 US News and World Report. Again, don't get surprised that you don't get interviewed. So there needs to be a match between your numbers and the median numbers or the average numbers of a particular program. Next slide. So at this point, which is half of the time that we had allotted, I'm more than happy to take questions regarding any aspect of admissions, and please take the chat if there is, or given the small group that we have, we're happy to take any questions. Just unmute yourself. So the question that is in the chat is, when did I know that I wanted to do MD PhD? First of all, I didn't know about the training. So I'm actually a person who did MD and then did a PhD and then did a residency and fellowship. But I kept all the loans from MD, and my parents were able to help me a little bit there because it was not as expensive as it is now, etc. And I was able to take care of some of those loans, etc. So my case is a little different. I have to tell you that it doesn't matter when you learn that this is the career. If you are a senior in college and you just learn that this is potentially what you really want to do, what you most likely need to do is apply for a significant, substantial research postbac program. For example, NIH has a research program that they pay you $30,000 per year. So we do have some laboratory assistant programs. We don't have a formal postbac program that you can register. We do have some masters. Unfortunately, the masters will cost you money. But the point is, experience some time in the research lab, wet lab in general, to understand whether this career is something that you really want to do, okay? Science is not for everybody. And in order to be competitive in this career, you need to do a substantial number of hours in research, typically at least 1,000 hours in research. So you need to have spent enough contact hours working in a lab, understanding what laboratory research, what a hypothesis is, what a project is, what is experimental design, how are you testing the null hypothesis in a particular research, what are your controls? I don't want to hear a lot about techniques, but only enough to tell me that you did those things. Your letters of recommendation will let us know that. In reality, what I'm more interested is to understand whether the wheels up here are questioning why. Medicine is about learning a system, a contained system that has a wheel here in this system, a cog that turns this way, and that moves something here, and that moves something there. The cognitive, the critical thinking that physicians do is they recognize particular patterns and learn that if you change acid base here, it's going to have an impact on a particular biochemical process in the liver that is going to lead to these particular symptoms. And so that is the critical thinking that happens in medicine. But questioning why changing the acid base leads to this metabolic rearrangement in signaling, it's a question that physician scientists do. And in medicine, for example, in my area of expertise, neurology, we need to learn so many little things to be able to treat strokes, Parkinson's, epilepsy. I am a world leader in epilepsy, and I can tell you that by changing certain things in epilepsy, it may lead to a hyperexcitability in some certain conditions, but not in others. And questioning the why and developing better understanding on those things is what makes us the physician scientists. It makes us to apply all this learning that I have done during graduate school and makes me do also better clinical inferences in some particular circumstances and understand some paradoxes. It shouldn't be this way, but it is. So clearly our understanding in the lab is not appropriate enough, and this might be a great question to investigate in the lab. So I was a why person very early on, but I didn't realize that that was a physician scientist. And so I learned about this as I was in my late teens, middle 20s, but I was already in medical school. But, again, I completed both degrees before my late 20s, and I started my residency and fellowship in my 30s and obtained my first job mid-late 30s. And that's typically what happens in physician scientists. So, any other question that I can answer? Jennifer, do you have any questions in your email or chat?
No, I don't have any questions, but if anybody has any questions about, they're still working on their application, haven't submitted their application yet. We have done several webinars over, the application process, but we're still here to answer questions about those, or answer questions about that process as well. So don't feel like you need to ask a question that's related to what we talked about today.
after doing the 2 years of medical school, about 1/4 of our students switch to another area of interest. And that's okay. We are looking for the best students. You can change and switch fields because up to now, you have been exposed to a limited repertoire of experiences. Having said that, there might be some life experiences that makes you very determined to become an oncologist and even a pediatric oncologist in lymphoma. Okay, awesome. We want in an orchestra all players. Now, there's another person asking that it was wondering whether a medical scribing job is a good way to get clinical experiences, and or whether it should be substituted by other things. So the clinical experiences for MD PhD programs, it's about shadowing a physician. If you get paid to do medical scribing to do that, that's very nice and awesome. But we only need 150 hours of shadowing or clinical experiences. So all of this extra training that you did, and the pay for medical scribing is pretty good. Well, that's time that you're taking away from the lab. So, somebody who comes with 2,000 hours of scribing, that's not what we're looking for. It will be very nice for physicians because you have been in many experiences that physicians do. You have seen what physicians do, and in terms of helping patients, in terms of the healthcare outcome, in terms of putting everything into Epic or whatever electronic medical record is. But it's not something that is going to advance your career as a physician scientist. Now, it's going to make you better and easier to have a transition to medical student. Absolutely. Now, who is the best physician? Who is the best shadowing experience that you can have as a physician scientist is shadowing a physician scientist. Preferably, if you are building an application and saying, I want to be the next diabetes, guru, or the best Alzheimer's guru, or the next microbiologist, be Pasteur. Okay, fantastic. So the best shadowing is shadowing a physician scientist in that particular area of expertise. Now, it might not be possible to you, but if it is, that's the best shadowing. And as I said, even if you have only 50 hours of shadowing in the current amount in the current circumstances, that's enough. It's about research, research, research. Well, I wish you the best of luck. The application should be something that sounds like you. It's not like sounding like your neighbor. There is no best application. The application, it's about your story, how you went and did certain things. It shouldn't sound just chronological. I mean, I can read the series of experiences, but in the research experience essay, focus on what were you looking at? What were you studying? It's about the hypothesis. It's not about that you were doing, Western blot here and there. Yet you can say, I did a series of techniques, including this, and that. It gives us an idea of what you were doing and contributing to the lab. Now we're going to be reading the letters of recommendation of that individual who was your research mentor. And if that letter is not available, that's a big red flag. Very likely we will be contacting you and asking you to provide a letter of recommendation from your key experience. And so that's a very important piece. Many times I hold the application and I may contact you and say, hey, we want to interview you, but I really want this letter of recommendation, because that's the difference between that interviewing you or not. And so, so it's very important that you keep, that you submit to AMCAS, that you request your transcripts, all of your transcripts, even that community college from, you know, the AP credits from you know, that you receive from high school may need to be added there. So make sure that all of them are added, and that is what takes the verification period. So there are people that apply on June 1st. I have not seen a single application in AMCAS. I've seen a few in TMD SAS, but TMD SAS is not something that we use to consider you for MD PhD. What I do with those guys is I send, don't forget to apply in AMCAS, because I am bound to take, by legal reasons, only the applicants that apply in AMCAS, period. Okay, I cannot consider somebody in TMD SAS. And so while there have been a, you know, a few thousand people applying for the MD program, only about 20 plus of those are applying MD PhD, and perhaps are part of our applicant pool for AMCAS. And so I just make sure to tell them, make sure that you submit this application. A lot of these things can be copy and paste, but your essays are different size. And so you cannot just copy and paste from TMD SAS to AMCAS or backwards. You are needing to fit things into the same, you know, into a different application process. The GPAs are calculated slightly differently, and but your AMCAS needs to be sent. So that's the big time limiting. Submitting the application in AMCAS, AMCAS reviewing you, and it takes 4 to 6 weeks reviewing those transcripts and making sure, doing the verification process so that they have the same grading across the nation. Because different schools grade things in different ways. So once that is done, we receive the application, and you know, we start the review, but we don't invite until letters of recommendation, and particularly the key letters of recommendation, are available. Okay, so you need to make sure that your letter of writers send to AMCAS and send if you're applying to TMD SAS. So these are two different independent process. It's like two goings to the bat, you know, to take a turn. And so certainly it's two different applications that may give you different outcomes. People can be rejected from the medical school and accepted to the MD PhD program, and then the medical school accepts them, but for the MD PhD program. But you know, people can be rejected here and is still accepted into the MD PhD, into the MD only program. Well, thank you for coming by and spending some time with us today. Thank you very much. Jennifer, anything else?
No, thank you so much for joining us today. And please make sure to check out our YouTube page to view previous webinars as well.
Great. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.